Welcome to MLB Live for Lock here on this Friday, October the 9th. Of course, I'm Jason. That is Alex. That is Terry. Fellas, how y'all doing on this early Friday evening?
Doing good, man. Got two single game contests tonight, and then some League of Legends Worlds. So what's not to love, right? Terry, how are you doing, man?
Doing good. Looking forward to the game tonight. Big elimination game. My team against Jason's team for all the marbles. Should be a lot of fun. Jace, before we dive in, I was wondering if we should maybe put a little wager on this thing, make it a little bit more interesting. One of those like how the mayors do, like something from my town versus something from your town. What do you think?
We can certainly do that. I feel like the Rays are in a good spot tonight. I mean, even though going up against Garrett Cole, I mean, look, I think the big storyline with this game tonight is that fact of you've got two starting pitchers who are both going on short rest for the first time in their career. You gotta love what Garrett Cole told Aaron Boone, "Give me the ball." You gotta love that, hearing that. But Alex, you tweeted out right before we started this show, these are the type of contests you love. So talk to me a little bit about your strategy. I guess we should start more on the DK side of things, since we do have pitchers on the DK side as opposed to the FanDuel side.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I love about single game contests is they just let you pick what positions you want to roster. And that means you can pick both pitchers. You can pick one. You don't have to pick a pitcher, so you really get options. And then you get all the relief pitchers as well as like salary relief options. So there's a lot of like correlations in baseball that we don't normally get to take advantage of because you only get one pitcher in each lineup or two on DraftKings. But now that you get to choose like exactly the composition of your roster, that opens up a lot of like interesting strategies you can use. So I'm pretty excited.
I guess I'll open this up to both of you guys in terms of from a DraftKings perspective of how you're deciding on your captain spot and the utilities or flex utility, however you want to reference it as, are you looking at, okay, you know what, I'm going to put either Glasnow or Cole as my captain, but then I'm also going to roster them as well in one of the flex spots?
It's awkward for me stepping on the best player in the world on that question. So, I think it makes a lot of sense to look to, if you're going to play one of the pitchers in that spot, probably roster the other one in the flex spot. I don't know how Alex feels about that, but to me, I mean, I primarily make those decisions on who to play in the captain spots based on a lot of what the ownership is looking like in our tools. So that's my first stop on any kind of a thing like that. And if you look down the ownership tool, it looks like we're getting reasonable ownership in the captain spot on Cole. We're getting decent ownership on Glasnow. I would probably be more inclined to look toward Glasnow just based on that. He's about half of what Cole was. So maybe captain him and then roster Cole in the other spot. Or maybe you double down on Rays pitchers, especially if we expect that maybe Blake Snell's going to come into this game. You could maybe pick something off there. Dog's barking over here. He likes it. So, just a little to speak to, some of Alex's, unique things that you can do over there. Maybe you look at it like that and just try and pick off a lot of one side of the pitching as opposed to trying to grab both sides of it.
Yeah, I think that's interesting dynamic that we have here where, like, if you take Cole out of the captain or Glasnow, like, it really restricts what you can do with the rest of your lineup. But these guys are by far the most likely players to be the highest scoring on the night. And I like what you're saying about Glasnow being half as owned as Cole. And, that makes it so Glasnow is going to be a really good captain play tonight. Cole is also a really great play. And I'm trying to, come up with lineups that are just combinations of both Cole and Glasnow, because the odds are pretty good that they'll hit a high enough score that you need them. And then, you really don't need to get too many plays right with the other four picks because there really aren't that many possible options that fit both in your lineup.
Yeah, when I was putting together some lineups on DK, I was more looking at Glasnow as captain, and just like what Terry said there, it was about ownership. I'm going, okay, more people than not are going to probably put Cole in that spot. So that was a route that I kind of went. And I mean, look, if you do like the Rays tonight, I think their salary, especially on the hitting side, I think that their salaries are pretty good. I do like, we'll get into that Of course, be sure to hit that thumbs up button right here on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button, that notification bell, so you can know exactly when we've got videos live here on Awesemo. We got videos all weekend long to get you ready for all the sports action coming up this weekend. Of course, we'll have a ton of coverage over the next 48 hours for Sunday's NFL. So you got to check out all the coverage we're here at awesemo.com. Talking about rostering that captain spot on DK and the MVP/star spot on FanDuel. If you, let's start on the DraftKings side of things. If you do not go pitching, what are the best hitting options in the captain spot? Alex, let's start with you, man.
Well, the hitting, it's going to be a lot tougher to nail down exactly where the production is going to come from. The Yankees lineup has 9 pretty strong hitters who have power upside, so any of them could hit a homer, and the ball's been flying in these playoffs. Like there's been talk about how it's a little bit juiced compared to the regular season, so I think a homer or two could really decide who wins tonight's contest. But honestly, like their whole lineup has that power, so it's just going to be really hard to nail down from the Yankees who you want. From the Rays, it's a little bit easier because I feel like maybe Randy Azazarena, Brandon Lau, those are the 2 power bats this year. And Austin Meadows as well has some good pop, so maybe one of those guys makes sense, but it's baseball. It could be anyone. Terry, who are you looking at as far as bats at captain?
Yeah, so I mean, what you said at the end there is what I usually like to lean into is, it's baseball, and we're looking for those lineups that a lot of people aren't going to be on. So I tend to, when I'm writing the stack slants column in the afternoon, looking for the low-owned stuff, that's just kind of how I play. So I'm always inclined to look toward the bottom of the lineups, toward what the ownership is going to look like. So, getting the guys like Gleyber Torres toward the bottom of the Yankees lineup, maybe less of like a Brett Gardner or Kyle Higashioka, guys who don't have quite the upside of a Torres. Torres has star caliber upside. He's as good a hitter as an Aaron Judge or Giancarlo Stanton, regardless of what he did this year. I mean, he was down a little this year, but to throw a number at you, he had 38 home runs in 604 plate appearances last year. So he's a kid with a ton of upside. On the Rays side of things, I agree. Those top end bats, the Rosarena, Choi, Lowy, Choi, and Meadows up there, are the guys I would mostly lean into. But there's a couple guys, you grab a Joey Wendell from later in that lineup, maybe a Kevin Kiermaier, the lefties. And then we've all seen Mike Zunino break a slate or two with his home run upside. He's an all or nothing type home run hitter. But you can kind of go to him there too. Alex, as far as when we're building with offense, how much do you stack and how much do you consider that with a single game slate as opposed to grabbing a few hitters here and there and kind of homer hunting on that?
Yeah, I think stacking, it definitely makes a lot of sense if you're picking a lineup that has a lot of bats. So you do need to pick one player from the opposing team. So I guess the 5-1 stack makes a lot of sense. And on FanDuel as well, it's kind of intriguing because you got the MVP at 1.5x and then the 1.2x, I believe, or is it 2 and 1.5? Doesn't really.
1.5 and 1.2, I believe.
Okay, cool. So.
No, 2 and 1.5.
2 and 1.5. It doesn't really matter. You just need to rank them in order from best to worst, basically. So it could make sense maybe to stack those 2 positions in particular because, first of all, on FanDuel, you need all bats.
Right.
And if one team puts up more offense than the other, it's pretty likely that they're going to have the 2 highest scoring players. So I'm having a lot of lineups that have either 2 Yankees in the MVP and star or 2 Tampa Bay Rays.
Makes sense. And just to go on down that road a little bit with the FanDuel construction with the MVP spot, the star spot, since 1 and 2 are typically the tightest correlated spots in the batting order, do you lean into, trying to play like a LeMahieu Judge combo in those 2 spots, try and pick off the most tightly correlated combo there? And if so, are you looking at it in terms of, I want to put Judge in the MVP spot as the second guy coming up and LeMahieu in the other spot because Judge is the more likely to hit the home run and drive in LeMahieu, thereby scoring more points and getting the bigger multiplier?
Yeah, I like where you're going with that. Like, I wouldn't necessarily restrict myself and set a rule in Fantasy Cruncher, but like if you're hand building a lineup, it's like you want to pick the best possible combo you can, and FanDuel gives you so many points for the RBIs and runs compared to DraftKings that maybe having those two guys that are close in the order, maybe if they even just get two runs / RBIs each, that could do it. So I think that's a good strategy. Jason, have you been playing any Showdown so far, or is this your first slate?
I have not, but I was going to mention, you notice how Terry mentions the 1-2 of the Yankees, doesn't mention the 1-2 of the Rays.
I mean, if I'm picking somebody from this entire game who's most likely to get on base for that example, I got to go DJ LeMahieu there. Come on.
I get you. I just got to bust on you a little bit there,
Little homerism. I told you guys, I got my 96 Derek Jeter shirt on, my elimination game shirt on today.
Yeah, it's so we've talked a little bit about the DK and the FanDuel side of things. By the way, load those questions up here in YouTube, also on our premium Slack account. We're going to get to those towards the end of the show. Do want to, of course, you've seen Jordan put it up on the screen so far throughout the show here right now. MLB player rankings is the free content up at Awesemo.com. So you got to check that out. Also, other free premium content we have there today, NBA fantasy point projections, also the NFL premium top stack tool. So be sure to check that, all that over there at Awesemo.com. Talking about the pitching matchup with Cole and Glasnow here, in terms of the pricing, captain spot 18.3K for Cole, 17.1K for Glasnow. In the utility spot, 12.2K and 11.4 for Glasnow there. I think the one question mark you kind of have, and I know someone in the chat's already brought this up, the fact of the amount of pitches that Glasnow threw on Tuesday. What should we expect out of him? How long could he go? I mean, typically with these Rays pitching, I mean, the Rays, they want to get to the 6th inning with the lead. Everyone knows that. And then they want to make it a 3-inning game. But if you're looking at Glasnow and the captain spot, how concerned should you be that what if he only goes 3 or 4 innings?
Yeah, I got to go back and adjust these projections because, 3 days rest, that's pretty concerning. And to boot, you got Blake Snell coming up as a reliever, so they really don't have to suffer any quality difference there. So I think it does make sense to maybe favor Cole over Glasnow. Glasnow is still going to be a pretty good play because he gets a lot of strikeouts, like even if it's unlikely for him to get the win. But Cole, I think, has much better odds at being the highest scorer because of Cole pitched on Monday and then Glasnow pitched on Tuesday, and that's a big difference. But Terry, I know you're big into the baseball and all the trends. So what do you make of the short rest and like how big a difference is 3 versus 4 days?
I think it's probably going to make a dramatic difference. I think that, typically if you see a guy come back on 3 days rest, it's going to be for a shorter start, where guys have been more, I think, from 4 days rest to pitch deeper into a game, if not, a full start, 85% of what you would normally expect, something like that. That's a top of the head number, not a data-driven number, but you get me. So yeah, I'm with you that I think Cole definitely has the better shot of giving us a 6-inning, hit the quality start number. And I think the projections was to give each of Glasnow and Snell 4 innings, just so that I got decent numbers for both of them, which I did. They come up okay. Definitely not to the level of what Cole would be with a 6-inning projection, but they both do have a significant strikeout upside. They're good strikeout pitchers. So I think we can get a decent score, even if either one of them goes 4 innings for us. 3 is a little bit tough to ask, but still it's, an unpredictable game. It is baseball, like you said. And if we're expecting these pitchers on both sides to keep the lineups down, then a pitching score might be enough to pick off a decent, a decent upside lineup for us. So, looking at Glass, 8.2% strikeout rate this year, up from 33% last year. He boosted his swinging strike rate from 12% to 14%. Just a dominant pitcher. Does it with 2 pitches, a 4-seamer and a curve. Barely throws his changeup, but he's got a dominant whiff rate on his curveball, and he's just excellent. If you look at Snell on the other side, I wish we had news for Snell for like a significant, we're going to bring him in the 4th, something like that. He strike out more against lefties. Their ISO is lower against lefties for the season. Their WRC plus is below average for the season against lefties. So I like what they do. I like his upside there. If you reset that sample to 2019, the Yanks are good against lefties, but it's been this, in this weird small season, they have struggled. So it's a tougher call, but the strikeouts are definitely there against the lefty. So I would like it if we had more news on Snell. But with that price tag on him, it's tough to say, yeah, go throw him in there.
Yeah, I was just going over to Mark Tompkin, who covers the Rays for the Tampa Bay Times, and he hasn't really said anything in terms of whether or not, when they could go to Snell, but that was what the decision was, that they go with Glasnow over Snell. And I mean, look, both these managers are going to be playing lineups, and I think the other thing we got to think about is if one of these pitchers' pitch count gets high up there. The Rays do have an internal philosophy of raising pitch counts, on the opposing pitcher. So that's going to be something kind of interesting, kind of see how that does play out. But yeah, obviously we'll be, sticking on Twitter and seeing what does happen there. Of course, I do want to let you know about the offer we do have for a Awesemo Plus. Get access to all of our great Awesemo Plus tools and content for nearly every DFS sport out there with an Awesemo Plus, a weekly pass for $29.95. This includes full access to all the premium content and tools on Awesemo.com, including player projections, ownership projections, in our premium Slack channel, and much more. You can see it on the screen right now as Jordan's got it up there, how you can sign up. And if you only want to play MLB, then sign up for our weekly MLB package for only $15.95. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. It's right there, very simple. Just go to Awesemo.com, right there on the left-hand side of the page. Click that Awesemo Plus tab, and that'll get you to where you can sign up for an Awesemo Plus subscription. And appreciate everyone that goes there. Of course, if you ever have a question, hit those up right there in our premium Slack account. We will get to you. Guys, let's talk a little bit about hitting here. Obviously, we've talked a lot about pitching. Well, let's talk about hitting. I know we briefly kind of talked about the top of the order. Obviously, you look at the Yankees lineup. It's a little more expensive to get to than the Rays. But let's start with the Rays lineup here. And what do you guys think about this lineup? And who do you believe is in a good spot here?
So overall, the Rays, they were just 14th in baseball with a 176 ISO against right-handed pitching, but they did have a 105 WRC plus. So like we've seen, they're good at hitting home runs, but they're also very good at creating runs, manufacturing runs, getting guys on base, et cetera, a little traditional baseball speak. They struck out 26.3% of the time against righties, though, so there's definite strikeout upside in the lineup there for Cole. And he's the kind of pitcher who could tear through a lineup like that if guys are just swinging and missing. You mentioned they do like to work counts. They do like to try and get pitchers to throw extra pitches. But he's the kind of guy who can kind of get through that, with his arsenal. So I'd be a little concerned about going over the top on them. Much lower run total than the Yankees last I saw as well. So definitely the upside is more with the Yankee side of things from where I'm seeing it. But of course, if we're looking for lower owned lineups, lower owned plays, I think the Rays are probably the lineup we're going to find them in more than the Yankees, just on name recognition, market size, things like that alone. You're going to get people more inclined to play the Yankees, and then they're going to get into the higher projections across the industry and all of that.
What's your take, Alex?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much anyone's guess whether the Yankees or Rays are going to be the better stack today. I guess the over-under of 7.5 indicates maybe we get a little bit more offense than you might expect given the Cole versus Glasnow matchup. But as far as bats to target, I think that Meadows and Lau have a pretty long track record. Azan Zarena, he's been off the chain this season, but it's like such a small sample size. I'm like, this isn't really adding up. So I'm not sure what to make of that. The rest of the lineup, not really high upside guys, but Wendell and Kiermaier have some good stolen bases. Terry, as you mentioned, Zunino is kind of like the all or nothing home run pick. So you got to like that. And then GPP batting ninth. But yeah, that's going to be the hardest thing tonight is really picking out a lineup with bats that really differentiates from the field because there's such a limited pool to work with. So I think that's kind of leading me in a different direction where, Terry, I know you're saying you got Snell in some lineups. I think that's really smart. I forgot to put him in my crunches, so I'm without Snell. Instead, I went to the relief pitchers, Pete Fairbanks, the closer of the Tampa Bay Rays. I feel like he's got some of the best stats on the team, so I think that he's pretty likely, even though they got Snell in there, to close out the game, and if the Rays are winning. And then Chapman on the Yankees side is a tremendous pitcher, and in the postseason, sometimes he goes more than one inning. So I'm kind of pairing him with Cole at the captain, because what I'm hoping for is Cole goes like 6-7 innings, a bunch of Ks. The Rays don't do much. I got a really cheap player that's going to maybe put up a few points to help me fit everyone else.
I like that. Yeah, I like that. And we were chatting about that a little bit before the show. Another guy I threw out there was Castillo from the Rays bullpen. He's somebody who I think they're going to turn to or could turn to for some of those seventh inning, eighth inning kind of innings. Try and maybe squeeze two out of them. Not to make it a BVP discussion. That's not why I'm bringing this up. But he has carved up the Yankees, so that's why I think maybe they turn to him. So that's not why I'm saying play him because of the recent track record against the Yankees, but that's why I think maybe the Rays will put him in if you get me. So I think he's interesting there. From an overall construction perspective, Alex, you mentioned, obviously we want to try and get to for GPPs, lineups that not a lot of people are building. You mentioned the pitchers, the starting pitchers are definitely the most likely guys to put up high scores, also going to be among the highest owned. On DK especially, how many lineups, or DK only because we don't have pitchers on FanDuel, on DK, how many lineups are you going to have where there's no pitching, or just rostering bats? Do you do that at all, and how much do you mix it in on like a percentage basis?
I would say 0, just because I'm trying to play these correlations, and without having pitchers, that becomes really hard to do because, like, for instance, if you have Cole in your lineup, that means you're really projecting the Rays to not have much offensively, and that really gives you a lot of clarity filling out the other 5 players in your lineup, where if you have all bats, you're pretty much guessing between 18 different guys. Your odds of hitting the right combo there are pretty tough, where with the pitchers, it's like so concentrated in one person that it's a lot easier to get the right combo. So that just like mathematically, I feel like that is my preferred strategy. But then the wrench is this rest issue, which people in the chat keep talking about. 2 versus 3 days rest. I mean, I think that 2 days rest, maybe Glasnow will be like pretty limited. So that definitely adds a new angle to this slate.
Well, I would look at it like this. You have to imagine that even after his last start, the Rays were already starting to have this internal conversation of what will we do if we get to Game 5. And I'm sure they probably already gone to the glass saying, hey, be ready to go Friday just in case. So I think that's something to play in there. But, we talk looking at the Yankees bats. I mean, Giancarlo Stanton has been on fire in the playoffs. And it kind of made me think of, like, would you pay up at 14-1 and put him in the captain spot on DK?
Well, I mean, he's a great player. I don't love the pitting a bat at captain, like, because we have the option of Cole, and I just feel like that's so much easier. And Stanton is like, of course, he has the best odds of hitting a homer, but still, like, that doesn't really differentiate him that much from the rest of the guys. So I really prefer Cole at captain. Terry, which way are you leaning? Do you have a lot of bats at captain, or are you going for pitching? What are you doing?
No, I think it makes more sense to put the pitchers at captain there. So it's probably something that across 150, I would dabble with a little bit, maybe play that not necessarily a blowout, but more an offensive leaning game, and play that game where, all right, we're getting into the bullpens early. These teams have scored 3-4 runs. These guys are tired and not pitching well, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe a small percentage of lineups along that narrative. But yeah, I agree that it makes more sense to play the pitching and the captain spot on DK. Over on FanDuel, I think Stanton makes a ton of sense in that MVP spot as a guy he's the top guy on my board too, in my home run model to hit a home run. But you mentioned it, Alex. There's a lot of guys that have pretty good shots at hitting a home run today. Some of the numbers on the Rays side are a little wonky with Cole's history this year of how many home runs he gave up. But I've got in my personal numbers, over 10 is an above average, and then like over 15 is a fairly significant. Stanton's at a 14.6. Then we get Judge at 13.08, and then I've got the top 4 Rays all over 10, are the next highest guys. So, like you said, you're kind of just throwing darts trying to grab that home run. There's a lot of guys that rank out pretty much the same there. And then after that, it's a lot of guys under 10. So those are your home run hitters, but you're kind of gambling on which one am I going to pick, which one's it going to be.
course, we're about to get into all those questions that people have left on YouTube and on Slack. So if you haven't submitted a question, go ahead and submit it now, as we're going to get to those. But do want to let you know about the Awesemo Podcast Network. If you're unable to watch our shows live on YouTube, it is available in podcast form, whether it's an MLB show, NBA, NFL, whatever sport you're looking for, it is part of the Awesemo Podcast Network. You just go to awesemo.com, click on the Awesemo Podcast Network, give you links to wherever you want to listen to your podcast. And of course, don't forget to like and leave a 5-star review in order to be entered into a monthly draw for a free Platinum Plus subscription. Make sure to leave your Twitter handle or also a username so we are able to contact you. So guys, let's get into the questions here. Andrew says, is it a must to captain one of the SPs in DK Cash?
That's kind of like a fancy cruncher question almost, because it's hard to do all the math. But I think, I'd probably go with Cole at captain, because with bats, there's so much variance. Cole, like, even if he has a bad day, he's going to put up more points than an average batter. So I think Cole is obvious captain. And fortunately on this slate, we got plenty of cheap batters to get in there. So I'd probably go to Yandy Diaz batting 5th at 3,600, at 4,800. G-Man Choi at 4,200 as my salary relief guys. Terry, what way would you go in cash?
I would do exactly what you just said, because I'm not a big cash player, and definitely for single game, not a big cash player. So I would take your advice if I were watching this show, and that's exactly how I would play it. How about that?
You're too nice, man. I appreciate it.
Next up, Tony says, what about playing Chapman?
I like Chapman. If I play Chapman, I'm definitely playing him with Cole, because I'm hoping for a close game. Otherwise, you're really hoping for maybe an 8-6, and that's unlikely. But I think Chapman, pretty much your options are going to be, do you want Mike Zunino, Brett Gardner, Kevin Kiermaier, or Chapman at 4K? And Chapman, he's not going to play every game. When he does, he'll probably average about 4 fantasy points. And if the other guys don't get on base twice, then he'll have a good shot at cracking the optimal.
Yeah, and fantastic strikeout upside out of Chapman. 48.9% strikeout rate this year. Pretty darn good, striking out half the hitters he faces. So you get that, like Alex said, you get a few points out of him, and definitely makes sense to play him as a correlation with Cole there.
Joseph says, how much money do you guys leave normally on the table for these MLB showdowns?
It's not something I sweat that much if it's a lineup that makes sense from a correlation point of view. From you've got the right pitcher in there, you've got the right bats in there, and you're getting away from the super public ownership. Getting away from ownership drives down your salary a lot of the time. So a lot of the time for me, those are the lineups that come up more, is leaving a few K on the board. So Alex, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that it makes sense. It depends on who's in your lineup, because for instance, if you try to get Cole and Glasnow in your lineup, that really doesn't give you much flexibility to leave money on the table. So that actually is something I like to do, because the less combinations of players that you can fit with these guys, the harder it is for someone to beat you when they both have a big night. So I think for me, I'm trying to cap out my lineups, but just come up with a interesting way to pair players together that maybe gives me an edge. And the fact, tonight, I feel like Blake Snell, Chapman, Fairbanks, they all have the red circle next to their name. And I bet people, unless they're real diehard players, aren't going to click this remove non-probables button to even consider these guys. So I think that you can get a big edge by going off the board a little bit here. So Terry, I throw this back to you. So would you play Snell and Glasnow in any lineups, or is it pretty much one or the other?
I think it could make some sense. We know there's a ton of strikeout upside in both of those guys' arms. The Yankees, have a reasonable amount of strikeouts in that lineup, and more with Judge and Stanton. Oddly, when they're healthy, there's more strikeouts in the lineup, despite the more danger from the home run upside. So I think it could make some sense. I just wish we had it nailed down as to, all right, they're both getting 4 tonight, and then we're going to the closer. Or, they're both getting 3 tonight, and then we're going 2 out of Castillo, something like that. But yeah, I think if you can fit it in and have reasonable bats with it from a salary perspective, it's going to be a way that not a lot of people are building for sure. And it's something that you have to swallow the possibility that, or the likelihood even, that you're not going to succeed with that construction. But it's something that, we saw you mentioned just the other day on Twitter, when the most obvious thing hits, or, quote unquote obvious, you don't want to be winning on those days. Right? So that's something that, you have to follow that line of thinking. That's how you win these big GPPs. So yeah, totally. I would look at those oddball constructions for sure.
Yeah, to be fair, that's just what I tell myself so I can sleep at night. As far as when it's obvious hits, I don't want to be winning. Jason, I mean, just as someone that maybe hasn't played as much single game this year, what are your first impressions of how you would approach this?
Well, my first thought was, my thought was put both Glasnow and Cole in the lineups, just because of their high probabilities of being high scores. That was my first thought. But then it's also, if you put both those guys in your lineup, I got find some value bats. Choi was definitely someone that really stuck out to me, potential. I like what you said a little while ago about Zunino, chasing for maybe that home run at the bottom of the order. I thought that is, like someone had asked a little earlier about, pump play of Gardner or Diaz. I'd probably go Diaz more than I would Gardner.
Yeah, I think Gardner, he's likely to be subbed out if you get Blake Snell up against him. So I think he might be a trap play that has a high likelihood of getting 0. And based on our ownership projections, a lot of people are going to this range of bats that's really, really cheap just to fit in the good plays. And trying to do that, you might just end up owning yourself. So I don't know. Terry, how do you feel about the 4K guys?
Yeah, well, I think it definitely makes sense what you're saying there to go just from a batting order perspective, even if you wanted to boil it down to that. Yandy hitting 5th in the middle of that lineup, more likely to see RBI opportunities, more likely to see an extra plate appearance than Gardner hitting 8th. And you mentioned Gardner. If they do bring in Snell, Gardner's pretty likely to come out of that game. They'll probably stick Clint Frazier out there in left and get his righty bat in there. So, potentially maybe a little sneaky Frazier play there if you expect that to happen. Maybe toss him in. But yeah, I would lean more into, if I'm looking for those cheap guys, I'm probably going to lean more into a guy hitting in the middle of the lineup or a guy like Zunino who's got that home run upside, who I think can potentially hit the ball out of the park for me. So those are really what I'm looking for there when I lean into the cheap guys.
That's a great point that you bring up about Frazier, because someone actually had asked that question about, and Josh says, do you see them pitch any Gardner with Frazier? I think that's for both teams in the situation of who's not in the starting lineup. Maybe you look at rostering because you think there's a good chance that they come into the game as a pitch hitter.
I think for the Yankees, the problem is Cole could just go pretty deep in this game, and then you're just out of luck. Even though I really feel like 4 days between, 3 days rest. No, the normal is 4 days. So to me, that's not like the hugest difference in the world. And that doesn't make me that cool on Cole's chances. So I think there's a pretty good chance Cole goes 6 innings here. And then you just have one at bat, and that's really not enough to do damage. So I do like the thought in chat about maybe Clint Frazier, because as Isang is saying, Frazier replaces Gardner when Snell comes in. That's going to be a lot earlier in the game than Cole's going to be replaced. So I think there's a lot of value there. Terry, what are you thinking? Would you ever play Clint Frazier? Because I pretty much I just crossed him off because he's not in the lineup. But do you have any lineups with him?
So it's not something that had really occurred to me until we're talking about it now. But in talking about it now, yeah, it's starting to make a lot of sense. And specifically what you just said, he's much more likely to get into this game in the 4th, the 5th, somewhere around there. And he might see 2-3 plate appearances versus somebody, if you're considering a sub from the Rays, a pinch hitter from the Rays, much more likely to get that at bat in the 8th, in the 9th, something like that. So yeah, I would definitely lean into the Clint Frazier side of things with that if we're talking about it here. I'm just trying to think of any other guys that might be relevant from that perspective. I wouldn't expect to see like Gary Sanchez, but there's immense home run upside with Gary. It's definitely not something that I would be comfortable doing or putting in here. But that's a name that jumped into my head for that. And the Rays do love to mix and match and play the platoon split game. So if we do get a situation where Cole does come out of the game early, you could definitely see some of these hitters start switching out. Unlikely that the Yankees go to a lefty early just based on their bullpen construction. But if you do get a Zach Britton inning in like the 7th, something like that, you could certainly see like a Brasso come off the bench, and he's got a guy with a little bit of home run upside. So, just to throw a name out there on that side. Hunter Renfroe, of course, if we get a lefty, big righty bat coming off the bench. So that's a possibility. He would be the guy I would go to over Brasso.
Now, in terms of, as we talk about sneaky bats as a captain spot, someone in chat mentioned about Randy. That was someone that Alex, you mentioned earlier. Is there a sneaky bat that you're looking at as a captain?
Well, I think Zunino would fit the bill because he's not going to project very well, but he has power. Randy, I think he's just like too popular, and now I saw a bunch of people on Twitter being like, "Oh, I just bought his like rookie cards for $50. They're going to be worth so much money." So, like, I haven't been following the baseball broadcast that closely, but he's been doing great. So I kind of think he'll be one of the more popular captain plays. But then maybe if you go to a guy in the middle of the order, that will reduce the ownership a lot. So the problem is that the Rays middle of the order doesn't have a lot of power, but you could easily go and Terry, like your Gleyber Torres call, Luke Voigt, Urshela, like all solid options at captain that will have low ownership, I think.
Definitely. If you still have that guy's Twitter handle, I've got some Shane Spencer rookie cards that I can sell him. We see guys all the time come up, have a real hot month to end the year in a little cup of coffee situation, guys. Don't get too excited about Urshela. He's having a great stretch here. There's no doubt about it. But I agree. I think he's going to be super popular just on he's been doing it, so people are going to be clicking his name in the captain spot where they lost to a bat there. So I would be looking to pretty much anyone else.
And fellas, we have reached lock. So good luck to everyone tonight. Hopefully you cash in and tweet us your winnings. We always love to see that our analysis helped you out tonight. And of course, keep it locked here. Awesemo all weekend long. We got coverage for everything you need DFS wise, whether it's NFL, NBA tonight. We got live before lock come up here later on tonight. NASCAR, MMA. We've got you all covered this weekend. So keep it locked here at awesemo.com. So that's going to do it for this edition of MLB Live Before Lock right here on awesemo.com.